It all started as a quiet, uneventful evening. I had long grown used to the monotony, each day playing out like a script on repeat. Conversations out of habit, gestures without meaning, warm yet empty gazes. He was there, but I could feel something shifting, an invisible wall forming between us. We still called it love, but was it really? I was sitting in the living room, lazily scrolling through my phone when the door opened. My son walked in. His face held a flicker of surprise, as if he hadn't expected to see me there. Then again, I hadn't expected that his presence would make my heart skip a beat. He didn't rush to speak. He simply paused, glanced around, and finally looked at me, just a second longer than what would be considered ordinary. There was nothing inappropriate in that gaze, and yet, it made me hold my breath. "Why are you sitting here alone?" he asked, sinking into the chair across from me. I shrugged, trying to mask the strange tension inside me. "Just thinking." Silence hung in the air. A subtle tension, as if there was a secret between us that neither of us dared to name. I knew this was just a moment. An ordinary evening. An ordinary conversation. An ordinary glance. And yet, something deep inside whispered, tonight would not be like the others. "Stay. Have some tea with me," I said, raising an eyebrow slightly. He nodded, sinking back into the chair, as if refusing had never even crossed his mind. As I stood up and walked toward the kitchen, I could feel his gaze following me. A warmth spread through my body. When I returned with 2 cups, he had already settled into the chair, his posture relaxed. I placed his cup in front of him and took my seat. The conversation started off ordinary, small talk about the day, about plans, about nothing in particular. But with each passing minute, the pauses between words grew longer. Then came the moment when words were no longer necessary. Our eyes met, just a little longer than they should have. Time slowed. The tension in the air became almost tangible, as if the room had been charged with invisible sparks. I felt my breath deepen, my heartbeat quicken. A quiet voice inside me whispered that this was dangerous, but I couldn't look away. My hand slid across the table, moving just a little closer to his. A barely noticeable movement, but he saw it. He leaned forward slightly, as if drawn by the same invisible force. "You know," my breath wavered, but my voice remained calm, almost a whisper. He didn't speak. But in his silence, there was everything. A fleeting thought crossed my mind, the consequences. I knew I was crossing a line. I knew that if something happened now, there would be no going back. But in that moment, reality lost its weight. There was only him. Only this gaze. And only this moment. I'll take a short pause. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Have you ever experienced something similar? Share your thoughts, I'd love to know. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. And now, I continue. The sound of footsteps behind me sliced through the air like a thunderclap. Everything froze. I felt my breath catch in my throat, my heart tightening in my chest. Slowly, as if in a dream, I turned my head. He was standing in the doorway. The man I had belonged to for years. The man with whom I had shared my life, my home, my memories. And now, his gaze was filled with something that made my blood run cold. Confusion. Fury. Pain. His lips were pressed into a tight line, his fists trembling just slightly. He didn't say a word, but his silence spoke louder than any accusations. This isn't what you think," I finally managed to whisper, but my voice was so unconvincing that even I knew there was no use. I felt my son freeze beside me, his body tensing. He knew, just as I did, there was no going back. The silence stretched, turning seconds into eternity. Time seemed to stop, trapping us in this unbearable moment. And then, suddenly, he chuckled. Quietly. Bitterly. You know, his voice was cold, controlled, which somehow made it even more terrifying. "I always knew that one day, you'd break." I blinked. My chest tightened even more. "But I thought you'd at least be smarter about it," he shook his head, locking eyes with me. "Do you even realize what you've just destroyed?" I couldn't answer. The room, which had been filled with secret glances just minutes ago, now felt suffocating, trapping me in fear. Everything had collapsed in a single second. I didn't know what would happen next. Would I find a way out? Or had this night become the point of no return? Leave a comment and let me know what you think about this story. Have you ever experienced something similar? Your comments mean a lot to me, and I read every single one. I truly appreciate each of you, and your support motivates me to create even more engaging stories. Subscribe and hit the like button so you don't miss the next thrilling tale. Wishing you a wonderful day. If you listened until the end, write in the comments, every action has consequences.